Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bycast, where tech meets business. Get expert insights and real-world business leaders, IT experts, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead and explore what's beyond the firewall. And welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Firewall. And today we've got Acronis back to talk about a day in the life of living through an attack. And I've got an amazing speaker today named Steve. Steve, welcome back, and thank you for being on our show again.
I appreciate you having me.
This is a common concern about almost everybody I talk to in respect to, what do I have to deal with? What am I pushing the panic button? How is this all going to pan out, and how is my vendor going to support me? So, why don't you kind of give us a little bit of a scenario here and how you would deal through this whole thing about getting through an attack?
Yeah. So what I'm going to show is actually I'm going to do something live with an attack, and I'll explain how the attack works. But before we get there, a lot of people think about prevention and detection, right? They cover different parts of the threat landscape. And when you do get attacked, I mean, there's many different methods. You got different playbooks. I'm going to share one way to do it. But one of the things about Acronis is we have a native integration, right, with security, backup, DR, right? And our whole theme, in 2006 is about protecting, automating, and managing. Well, how do you protect? And some of that is protecting, but then you also have detection, right? So you need to automate some things here, right? And then how do you manage this? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the process because, I've been through this, utilizing different solutions. And again, you could fill in the blanks for whatever these are going to be, right? And then how Acronis would do it related to an attack, right? So the goal is to really understand the operational processes and the efficiency of having that native integration with one console. Now, you could select different vendors in different categories. For example, I don't care. You could pick a EDR product or an XDR solution, a backup product, a disaster recovery, and a patch management solution, right? Vendor choice, whatever you want. So say you were hit with ransomware, all right, where backups are compromised, right? Now, this can happen in many ways, right? That could be through lateral movement where the backup servers, where once inside the network, the ransom operator can use stolen credentials or exploit vulnerabilities to move laterally, if you will, and gain access to, say, some NASs or network attached storage devices, some on-prem backup server, or even virtual machine hosts, right, where they store the backup snapshots, right? As an example, two groups like Black Cat and Lockbit, right? They've been known to scan for backup software interfaces, right, and delete or encrypt those backup repositories after gaining, say, domain admin privileges. They also sell backup wipers. But another way is attackers that get access to cloud admin accounts, like with 365 or Entra ID, right? They can delete those cloud backups or snapshots, right? They can disable backup policies or retention rules, or I've even seen where they can permanently purge data using what I say are what I call soft delete bypasses, right? Or retention rules, or even say permanently purge data using what I would say like in 365, right? Or PowerShell to skip the recycle bin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one can also say, yes, immutable backups is resilient, right? But misconfigurations for that creates the risk. So say you have Amazon S3, right? And say the object lock is not enabled, right? Or having some air gap system with a hidden network configuration file, like a virtual LAN is accidentally bridged, right? So in other words, there's many different ways that it can happen, right? Some of it's human error. So what I'm going to go through today is a persistence attack. Now, imagine I used a product like Nmap, right? And I scanned the network and I saw some open ports. And for example, port 3389 RDP, right? And I noticed that it's an internet-facing server and port 3389 is open. Well, I might be able to use a product like Shodan, right, to go in and say, oh, what version of software are you running there, right? Then I can go research those vulnerabilities, right, and exploit that vulnerability. Now, the particular attack that I'm going to do today, um, which I'm going to show you live, is I am imagine then I'm in there and I installed say Mimikatz right on that machine. Normally, when a person logs in, they the username is in clear text, right, in memory, but the password's encrypted. Well, what I'm going to show is something I did in the WMI, and I'm going to where the password also comes in plain text, and then Mimikatz can actually grab that stuff from from memory, and now I have the username and the password, right, that a person logged in with, right. So I'm going to go through, such a scenario. When we do the rollback, a lot of people say, for Windows systems, right? Windows will create volume shadow copies automatically if you have it enabled, right? But I could tell you a lot of ransomware out there, they'll delete the VSS commands, like, VSS admin delete shadows and then all, right, in the command line. But if it still exists, you might be able to recover individual files, right? But keep in mind that a system restore, a lot of people don't realize it does not remove the malware, right? So it will revert system files and registries to the prior state. If the ransomware persists, right, and say user profiles, scripts, or some scheduled task, it's going to re-execute, right? So, and then you have the Windows system, right? To restore includes the registry hives, which are core files that store the Windows registry, and it's a physical file on the disk, right? Well, ransomware, what I've seen is rarely relies on persistent registry changes. It often runs once and then exits, right? Especially with the way AI is being used in technology today, it's like we got to get in, get out. Um, some of the dangerous ones, which I'm going to talk about, is persistent registry changes. What I'm going to show is it runs, it's new services or a WMI event, right, which system restore may not fully remove. So I guess WMI, that's Windows Management Instrumentation. And that allows the system to automatically trigger actions in response to, say, some specific system event, right? It's great for IT automation, but attackers often misuse the event subscription for malware persistence. And I'm going to kind of go through that. So you see on my screen here, yeah, you can see it. I'm going to go down to protection, and you're going to see that, I got this one client here, right? I could choose all my clients and look at all the incidents. You will notice that everything is mitigated right now. And my last time doing this was November 20th. Okay. So I wanted to show that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a certain command here to do this. And I don't want to necessarily show that. All right. So remember, I got in here and I'm going to just go to my command interface. Okay. And I'm going to run as administrator because remember, I got in here, right? So I'm going to run this and I'm going to hit it. And you say it was successful, right? So it was just, I hope it was. That was fast. So now it was successful that it ran. Okay. And I think in here somewhere I have it. So we're going to wait for that to actually show up in the console. It might take just a little bit for it to come up into the console. All right. Now you could see here it was automatically mitigated. Okay. In this particular situation, because this is a brand new one, right? Now what I did was I whitelisted it. But you can see March 4th. That's today. And it closed. But the positivity level showed me it was a 9.5. Okay. In that particular situation. Now, what happened was if you looked at my protection plan, you will notice that it bypassed the prevention layers. And it doesn't matter which product this is. And you will notice that I have every piece of protection piece on. Doesn't matter what product you have, I have everything on. Okay, real-time protection, right? Anti-malware, local signature-based detection. All of this is on. Now, I did all that, right? And I also have our EDR product enabled, and that was the reason why. It picked it up, and unfortunately, I did whitelist it. I should have undid it. But let's go back to protection. You will see that incident, and I'm going to investigate the incident. So what you're seeing here in the middle of the thing is called the cyber kill chain, right? And Lockheed Martin, they have a trademark on that name. But it happened on this machine. You could see that I created a process. I ran it through the command line process, and you can see that it changed the registry setting, right? And it will tell you exactly where it went, right, and how it happened. Okay. Now it did automatically mitigate it and close it because I whitelisted it so that it wouldn't happen again. Um, but let me walk through as if, and I'm just going to say it's not mitigated, just so I could show the options here, and it's not started. Okay. So you could see that we use OpenAI over here, so we can explain in plain English what happened. So I ran through the command line. And my registry. I hit a configuration piece for it, right? It's to help me gain unauthorized access to sensitive information. In this case, it was user credentials, including the password. Um, and you can see the date and time stamps and everything in here. Now, I could go in and do various response actions for this at this moment. One of those would be I am going, I already did an allow list. I could stop this process. I can't roll back the changes because it already did it for me. So I apologize in this video because I actually whitelisted saying, hey, if this happens, automatically mitigate. But I'll show you in a process where that happens. Now I could do one by one here, or I could have said, hey, I want to isolate this incident. Okay. I could have isolated the incident to say, hey, shut this off from the network. But let me go to remediate entire incident just to show some things. What you're seeing here is the power of native integration. Now, this is the day in the life I was telling you about. If you look at steps 1, 2, and 3, choose your EDR product. Honestly, I don't care what product it is. Every product can do this. Okay. Well, worth their weight in salt. So I would stop it, quarantine it, and try to roll back the changes. Okay. I want to roll back the changes here. And let's just say it was files and registries. It's going to say nothing yet back because I already fixed it. But what if I can't roll back, right, at that moment, right? Well, what do you have to do, right? You have to, sorry, it's on my screen. All right, it's going to calculate. So if you think about it, if you cannot roll back, and you can't figure out oh gee, it changed 30 registry settings and 16 files. How do you know what was what, right? So you go to your backups. So right, the first thing you have to think of though is, my backup's compromised, right? How far back does this go? Was it the last backup? Was it 2 days, or a week of backups, right? So the question comes down to now restoring and how fast you can restore as this is a subset of an incident response plan, right? So you've been hit, you got this persistence attack, right? Now, again, if they have the ability to roll back at this point, right, you're good, right? And that includes children processes. And, this is all good. And hopefully then they take some action, right, for a snapshot or back up the solution at the moment of the time, right, the latest state. But if they can't revert back, right, now it's a manual process. Now you got to go to your backups. Okay, choose your backup vendor. I don't know who it is. All right, so now you got to start the console for the backup, right? And you may have different teams handling these types of things. There's also the ability to do disaster recovery if it's a critical server. Okay, if again, if you have our product, so that's another product if we could talk about, right? You need to confirm that the backup predates the infection point, right? Now you got to scan the backup, right? Contents, if possible, right? Now you could mount the backup in some isolated sandbox environment. You can then run the EDR antivirus scans on the restored files, right, and check the suspicious startup entries or new admin accounts or some unscheduled or some unusual scheduled task, right? You just have to make sure that the backup is not altered during the attack. Now, hopefully you might have had immutable backups, right? But they could be misconfigured, right? Like I said earlier, Or say your cloud backups, right, with the object lock piece we said. But what if there's no immutable or other methodology, if you will, for assurance on those backups being clean, right? Now you got to scan that backup, right? And we want to restore and clean that process. So here we are with vendor one now performing that action to clean it. Now that's done. So now we got to go to vendor two. Now we're restoring our backup. We also need to validate the backup, make sure it's good to go. But let's add a third scenario to that. Um, Patching. Patch Tuesday, right, occurred and you tested and then you patched, right, to production, say by the next Tuesday. But then the next day the attack occurred. Now you need to go back to Monday's patching. Um, let's see, Monday's patching and then say Tuesday at 6 a.m., but you patched at 11, right? So for many companies, you have patch baselines, for consistency, compliancy, right? And honestly, recovery integrity, right? Now you got vendor three. So pick up your third vendor here. You need to run a vulnerability scan. Then you got a patch, right? And then you want to run another vulnerability scan to make sure it does in fact patch. You might want to run another third-party open source one, right, to validate those findings, right? Now you patched, right? All of that happened, right? Now, what could we do here? And unfortunately, this isn't going to happen because I whitelisted it, and I'll show you where I did that. What I did here was the power of all of this automation, management, and protection is if I cannot do this here, I want you to recover to a workload. I want to select the workload. There's also a button in there for safe recovery, so it will scan and clean for malware during that whole entire process. What I did earlier was I want to add it to a block list for every other machine because I don't know if they're moving laterally throughout here. So this could be 500 machines right now. And I want to now block this so that if it happens on any machine, I don't worry about it. If I have a patch management, I could do the patch management and restart and hit no. Then I want to change the investigation to closed. All I have to do is hit remediate. Remember, the other one, I had 3 products, 3 different consoles, multiple processes, just to get me back to restoring. Yeah, you hope that your EDR product got you here, and you don't have to do it. But if it doesn't, which I've seen, especially with some PowerShell manipulations, you have to go through all this other stuff, and you got a different vendor here, different vendor here. Oh, when you're all done, now you got to go back to vendor one and add a block list. Oh, and hopefully, your patching was up to date. But if not, then you got to patch. So typically, I look at you got to add it to a block list, you got to recover. All of this is right here, just one console. You just point, click, select safe recovery, and hit remediate, and let it go. If it does steps 1, 2, and 3, great. If not, it will automatically go here for you, and then scan and clean and so forth. Hopefully that makes sense. Sorry that I already added it to a whitelist, so it did its job. I gotta undo that now. It did its job actually because I added it to a block list prior to this. So does that make sense from this perspective? Are you there? I think you're on mute. Oh, hold on. Yeah, it won't let me change my setting on the speaker. Interesting. Oh, here we go. Yeah, it says you're on mute there. There it is. That's okay. Let's. So ultimately, since we're still recording, there are some ways that you can minimize an incident, right? I call it the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. 3 copies of your data, 2 different media types, 1 being offsite, but I'm also including 1 immutable, hopefully set up correctly, but then 0 errors in the backup logs. Again, if the backups are compromised, that's an issue there from that. So you can see from this workflow on the screen that I did when I added to the block list, right? And that was every particular thing. Typically, an EDR platform, you would have to upload file hashes to block that execution, or you would have to go back to the EDR system, right, to do all that. Some you got to collect the file hashes, malicious IPs, or domains or registry keys or file paths, right? Now, while some solutions out there can do some of these, like hashes and IPs and domains, they may not block registry keys via the indicators of compromise, right? So then they got to create some custom detection rule. But you can see how easy it was in our product. So really, this native integration piece allows you to work with all of these processes without having to toggle through all these different systems. And then that is helping with operational efficiency.
Cool. Yeah. Can you hear me okay
Yeah, you're
now?
back.
I'm
You're
back.
back.
Yeah,
All right.
I do
Cool.
apologize. I we had a power surge early on, and it knocked off some of my settings, so I had to jump in and out. So they'll fix that on the recording. Yeah, no, I actually had a real big, interesting question. When we look at all these processes, obviously it seems overwhelming. Like, somebody like me looking at this dashboard, it's a daunting situation. You know, with an in-house IT or existing IT people, like obviously it seems like all the capabilities are there to get yourself out of trouble. How complicated is it from training people up on this? And I think any executive that's looking at this or business owner that's looking at this, you know, it's overwhelming. Like this dashboard for somebody who's not technical enough is going to see this and go, okay, this needs like an expert. How hard is it to kind of get trained up to do this, or have an engineer or your in-house IT person learn this process, or is this something you still want to find a partner to support you? Doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you've got this solution, you need some sort of a partner to help you through this.
Yeah, so service, obviously service providers, right? They're managing that. This is more from a managed service provider role because, as you can see here, I could look at all of my customers and all their incidents, right? So I don't have to toggle between clients. We also have our academy, which I'm a team of. So we actually do training, and we also have live trainings, right, and certifications in our product. So we actually go through these. For example, we have a security, we have security basics, course of how to set up protection plans and the best practices and so forth. But then eventually we get into, in this case, the EDR, and I actually walk through training of how to actually mitigate and do all this stuff. And we do it. We also have live courses, so people can ask questions during that too, and all of that's recorded for them, so they can actually take the exam. There's also a PDF of the training course that they get, and they can also refer always back to the courses. I always recommend the live because if they've tried things and they don't know what they're doing, they can always ask questions during the live courses too. But we also have self-paced training available on our Academy portal site at learn.acronis.com.
Right. Yeah, our engineers have taken quite a few of those online real time courses, and they found them incredibly valuable because of the real time feedback and being able to go through some of the different modules with the team. So it's definitely the way I would recommend anybody who's looking to get trained up on doing this work.
Well, if it's security stuff, I appreciate that compliment because I'm the one that did them.
Yeah, well, we go through the academy internally, so our guys are all over it. So they love it when you guys do them, and definitely it's something that we value as part of the partnership. So yeah, keep them up.
All right. Well, hopefully that helped. For people to understand, how, because it's really about recovery time objective here, right? How fast can you get this back up and running?
Right.
Now, like I said, the EDR product, yeah, you just hope. But here's the thing: even if you did isolate and you were able to roll back, now you got to find out how many other people were impacted. Did they do lateral movement? And you're chasing. And you can automatically add to that block list right away when you're doing this. And if they're moving laterally and they try to do it to another, say, critical server, they just can't because you said this specific process someone's trying to run. And if I go to server 2, 4, 8, 10, I can't do it because like I just showed. Unfortunately, I forgot to unblock list it. You could see that it said, "Hey, I mitigated this." Now, typically, when I don't have it in a block list, it would have said not mitigated. I would have rolled it back and so forth like that. But it proved the demonstration that, oh, I added to a block list and I didn't have to do anything. Think of some EDR products out there, what you have to do to create that, right? And we just did it with a few clicks from that perspective.
Yeah, and that's a big element when we look at the response time or time to acknowledge and respond. I find that a lot of people undervalue that, and not always does the UI and the system allow you to get that response to the point you're able to, mitigate that. And this is where it becomes overly complicated. This is where, some vendors and some partners out there, when they're looking at their solution stack, they're getting into very complex infrastructures, and you need a full dedicated security team that does this all day and every day, and you don't have the option. And we've always loved this architecture because it's simple, it's easier to respond, easier to mitigate exposure, being able to shut it down, restore, get the scans done at the same time, and being able to get customers back up quicker, faster, and easier. Because at the end of the day, I think that is a big ask. A lot of people undervalue the aspect of, from time of breach, how fast am I going to be back up and running? And a lot of times there's overestimation or underestimation on how long that will actually take. And people assume it's 30 seconds, and in some cases it's days. So part of this whole process is to go through that exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, as part of this presentation, I guess the question would be is, if we're kind of getting all panicky right now, and companies that are watching this today are a little bit concerned and a little bit, anxious about where they stand, you know, what would be the first step that you would recommend to open the doors on evaluating their posture so that they can better respond and be ready for the next event?
Well, I mean, it always goes back to, do you have, have you done a business impact analysis, right? Have you defined the risks, available, and the prioritization, right? It's always about prioritization, right? The criticality of not just the asset, but the criticality of the data, and the labeling of your data. I hope I'm going the right direction of what you're asking.
Yep.
And then from there, you have to say how what's an acceptable recovery timeline. What's an acceptable moment in time? Like, can we lose a half hour's worth of data on this particular machine, or is it days worth of data? If it's your e-commerce server, that might be a shorter window. If it's the front desk receptionist, it might be an hour later, or a day.
Yeah.
And then the time. What's an acceptable recovery time, and that has to be discussed, especially with a service provider and an end user, because let's face it, you're going to have your standard SLAs, but when things hit the fan, sometimes the SLAs go out the window. All right, in those particular situations, right? But you have to keep communications, right? And it always comes down to is just how fast can I get everything back? Here's the thing: resiliency, right? Everyone knows that with the advent of AI, and our product is really, really, really moving forward with a lot of AI built inside of it. The question comes down to is, let's face it, a resilient company says, we know we're going to get hit. We just know we're going to get hit. But are we prepared? How prepared are we? And I think that's the mindset and the cultural mindset that people have to start changing to. Are we going to get hit with this? As a matter of fact, I looked at the persistence as plain text password storage. So it even explained what I was trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you right now that the intelligence on the AI capabilities on hacking networks is accelerating at such a pace that I have not seen anything like this in my life. And the intelligence around how they're going around spear phishing and these attacks is just incredible at the pace I'm seeing. So when we look at when we look at what companies need to do, and the trend that I'm seeing for 2026 is updating your disaster plan, updating your policies around recovery, uptime. And it's not just about refreshing your antivirus, it's about the whole picture. And I think a lot of companies need to step back and say, okay, when was the last time I looked at my DR strategy? I'm going to guess 9 out of 10 businesses out there, it's all in and around the time frame of the lockdowns. And so it's
Uh,
been 4 or 5 years since anybody's looked at an average of what that strategy looks like.
well, the other thing is they'll say we'll do once a year, we'll do a tabletop exercise in a particular scenario. Now, if they're going to incorporate AI into their organization, right, you got to look at your incident response plans and say, I'll take the same scenario and we use AI, but let's not use AI too. What would happen? Like if our AI engine went down internally, now what do we do? Right. So you got to look at both scenarios there, right? And you incorporated a new technology in there, you better be doing it. And also, cyber insurance is now mandating what have you done with your incident response plans lately?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot. And I think that, again, looking at the average business out there, mid-size, large, small, I think the last time anybody really looked at it was the beginning of the pandemic, where people were like, okay, we got to go from the office to work from home. Okay, how we're going to re-strategize all of our efforts and everything. And then now, at least in Canada, I'm seeing a lot of companies bringing people back in, but there is still this new hybrid, and all the systems have changed. Your firewalls have changed, your infrastructure has changed. AI has been brought in, the technology, the firewalls, everything that you've had from that era is almost 100% obsolete. And unless the vendor itself has actually upgraded it with your subscription, and not everybody has a upgraded subscription plan, what ends up happening is you're sitting on a legacy platform that now needs to, be updated. Anyhow, listen, Steve, I want to thank you for your time on this demo. It was incredible. I do appreciate all of this, and thank you for coming out today.
Yeah, I apologize that I already added it to a block list to actually show that process, but it actually did its job because I did a block list.
Yeah, that's okay. It gives everybody the sense of what's going on. And at least, if people have further questions, they can always reach out to their IT person. They can reach out to Acronis because, maybe they want to talk to you guys directly. Obviously, we're a big partner with Acronis. So people that have listened to this or watched this may have questions. Obviously, they can always ask. But Steve, I want to thank you, and all of our listeners and followers. I want to thank you for liking, following us. Again, we're always looking at bringing in innovative speakers, topics, discussion points. So anybody who's got some great ideas, please reach out or send us a note on one of our feeds, and we'll definitely put that into it. So again, thank you. Like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one. Have yourself a great day and enjoy the weather out there. Have a good one.
Yeah, bye.